শোনা যাচ্ছে না। Assalamu alaikum, good evening, and welcome to tonight's episode of Talking Point. I'm your host, Syed Neaz Ahmad. In our studios today, we have a well-known journalist, a writer, a historian, Mr. Syed Badrul Ahsan. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm fine, thank you. It's always wonderful to be on your show.
Thank you very much. You have been so kind, and thank you for making time for us, particularly today when it is so pleasant outside.
It is, yes, definitely.
It doesn't seem like February.
It's almost like spring.
Spring is.
Yes.
There's spring in the air. Somebody was asked, spring in the air, and he said, why should I? You have studied history, you have written about so many leaders and studied their lives, events. We as students at school and colleges, I found history very difficult too, because one had to remember not only anecdotes and incidents, but the tragedies and the good things, but also the dates. And I used to muddle up the dates, you see, so whether it was 1901 or 1910, the zero would go the other way, you see. What is history? I mean, it's a chronicle of events of the past. We have anthropologists, they study something that relates to the past, and then we have archaeologists, they study things of the past, and we have historians that they study things of the past, you see. But a historian is somebody who studies the events of the past, isn't it? It's also said that a historian also studies the events of the future, which is, I find a bit confusing to me.
That's a bit dodgy.
Yes. How can you study? But of course, you have to know your past before you can indulge in planning things for future, right?
Definitely. Because as far as I can see it, now I actually don't regard myself as a historian, but I have this interest in history. I've always had this interest in studying history right from my school days. At this point, the way I see it is one can look at history in two ways. Look at the immediacy of the events around oneself, and also study history from a distance. Usually when historians write, they study events or incidents from a distance. For example, the Vietnam War. At a particular point in time in the 1960s, people, of course, journalists used to write on the war and what was going on there. But so many years later, if you have historians writing on the war, historians like Max, excuse me, like Max Hastings. So he has written some very good, incisive works on historical events like the Vietnam War and the Second World War. So history also ought to be studied from a distance. In the initial stages, if you look at history, if you study history, you tend to look at the dates, you tend to look at the personalities constituting that history. At a later date, you not only remember the dates, you not only remember the personalities, you also have you also develop or should develop the ability to study the contributions of these personalities, the impact on history, whether that impact was positive, or whether it was negative, or whether there were gray lines. It was a mixture of the two. Because in history, you don't look for perfection. You don't look for perfect people.
So you can't, because see, you study something that has already happened.
Yes.
They were like that.
So objectivity is the issue here. So if one doesn't study history objectively, say like so many other subjects, but most particularly history, when you study the character of a person, the life and times of a particular personality, be it in politics or any other area of life, there will be some objectivity about it. I get to read a good number of books back home in Dhaka, but most of those books, see, they deal with political personality, historical personalities in our country, in the subcontinent. So sometimes they tend to be rather disappointing, because either they're very fawning, flattering biographies, or they tend to be very critical. So that I would say is not really history.
But one has to be very honest about when writing about something, some events that happened in the past. You see, you may not have access to all the information, see, but then you have to make a very calculated and honest sort of conclusion about the thing. You can't make a judgment, but you have to come to some sort of conclusion about what had happened or what could have happened in these circumstances.
Absolutely. Like today is the 22nd of February. It happens, well, first of all, let me say how we also, you and I and people like us, Bengalis, we are all in a very mournful mood because of the fire that engulfed old Dhaka the other day. And again, as I was saying, let me go back to the question of 22nd February. This happens to be a very particular day in Bangladesh's history. Exactly 50 years ago, half a century ago to the day, the Agartala conspiracy case was withdrawn. And Bangabandhu was released. He had not become Bangabandhu then, he became Bangabandhu a day later on the 23rd of February. So now we study history, we study that event, and I think it's important that people should know. I've just talked about the withdrawal of the Agartala conspiracy case.
Right.
But then when we talk of the case, when we try to relate it to the present, when we try to tell our younger generation, our children, and perhaps our grandchildren of what happened, I think they need to know all the details of what went on, why the case was instituted, how what happened to force the regime of Field Marshal Ayub Khan to withdraw the case. Now, I think we were talking about some other thing before this program began.
Right.
It's related to Ekushe, 21st February 1952. Now, we observed 1952 Ekushe February every year. This year, too, we have observed the occasion with solemnity here and also back home. Now, what does bother me at times, what does worry me at times, is the fact that not many of us are acquainted with some of the other details of Ekushe. For example, after 21st February 1952, a lot of things happened. Now, before 1952, in 1948, as a matter of fact, on the 25th of February, Dhirendranath Datto, he stood up in the Pakistan Constituent Assembly asking the Speaker, or recommending that apart or in addition to Urdu and English, Bengali should be introduced as a language of the House, one of the official languages. Now, these things, when we talk of Dhirendranath Datto, yes, we pay tributes to him on his death anniversary, on his birth anniversary, but on the occasion of Ekushe, these facts should be remembered, and people should talk about these, such realities. And in like manner,
and that is the chronology of this
exactly. Ekushe. There's 25th February 1948. Dhirendranath Datto speaks in the Constituent Assembly. Then events move on until
this
they come.
This is, I think, Muhammad Ali Jinnah came to Dhaka and he declared in 19th of March.
March, yes.
You see. So this was a few days before that.
About a month earlier. So, and then, of course, in 1952, before this tragic event occurred, the Chief Minister, the Governor General, in fact, Khaja Nazimuddin, he had promised the students, they met him in Dhaka, he had promised a very sympathetic view of the situation, but then he backtracked and then it happened. Then again, I think, when considering 1952, what exactly happened, one should also look at the role that was played by Aziz Ahmed. Aziz Ahmed, who later became Pakistan's Foreign Secretary during Ayub Khan's time, and when Bhutto was Foreign Minister. Under Bhutto, when Bhutto was first President and then Prime Minister, he became Pakistan's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. So, but he was Chief Secretary in East Pakistan, the then East Pakistan at the time in 1952. It is said that the orders to shoot, the orders to shoot went out from him. Now, then again, I'm saying all these things because we don't know. There are many things about our history, Bangladesh's history, or even subcontinental history that we tend to miss. For instance, the first holiday, official holiday, which was declared on account of Shohid Dibosh or Ekushe February, was in 1956 by then Chief Minister Abu Hussain Sarkar. And Abu Hussain Sarkar belonged to the Krishak Shramik Party. And he declared the first holiday on Shohid Dibosh, and it was on his watch that the construction of the Shahid Minar, as we see it today, began. But then it could not be completed because martial law intervened in 1958. Later on, the work was resumed, and what we have today is the Shaheed Minar that exists in Dhaka at present. But then again, this Shaheed Minar is a new one.
This present Shaheed Minar, when was this established?
This present Shaheed Minar was actually established in 1972, because the one that was originally constructed, which was sort of initiated by the government, the provincial government of Chief Minister Abu Hussain Sarkar, that began in 1956, was interrupted in 1958. In the early 60s, it began again. So in 1963, early 1963, it was completed, and it was inaugurated on 21st February 1963. Ayub Khan was in power.
Yeah.
So
they have softened.
They have softened, especially after the Tagore centenary celebrations in 1961, which was under the leadership of Justice S.M. Murshid and so many other of our eminent cultural activists. So from 1963 up to 25th March, that Shaheed Minar, or that monument, was there. On the night of the 25th March, one of the first things that the Pakistan Army did as part of his genocidal operations, Operation Searchlight, was to destroy the Shaheed Minar. And what they did was, in place of the bulldozed Shaheed Minar, they put up 2 bricks, and they had a strip of paper which said Masjid, mosque. In other words, they had decided that the Shaheed Minar was something anti-religion, anti-Islam, and the mosque should be built there. So after liberation, the construction of the Shaheed Minar began again, and that is what we have today. Now, going back to Abu Hussain Sarkar, he is not remembered, and that's the strangest thing. There's so many people
in our living memory.
See, there are so many people we do not remember in our history, and he died in April 1969, and we understand that he died in very miserable, very sordid circumstances, but nobody recalls him. But I think our historians or our researchers, they should do some fact checking.
Is it? Do you think that this is just by chance, out of our apathy, we are not interested in it, or is it designed that Abu Hussain Sarkar should not be remembered?
I think it's a combination of both. It could be that sections of politicians have always tried to ignore another section of politicians. That is by design. And then the question of apathy also comes in. We are simply not interested. We look at the big picture. But why that big picture happened, who made that big picture possible, the personalities involved, we don't remember them. We don't recall them.
This big picture is made up of so many pigments, you see, so many small pictures.
Because if you don't have separate chapters in a book, you don't complete the book. And we go straight for the book without considering why that book was written, who wrote that book. So these factors are there. Now, as I said earlier, people like Abu Hussain Sarkar are not remembered. Now, that is, again, I would say, that is rather betraying the cause of history, because when you study history, no matter what your political inclinations are, political loyalties are, which party or which personality you support or may not support, these projections should be there. For example, I keep telling people through my writings and also in normal conversation that when we talk of the War of Liberation, we tend to begin with 1971, and we are told, our children are told, we were told in our time that there was Pakistani subjugation, Pakistani neo-colonialism, which is all very much true. But what we do not do is to explain the extent of that exploitation, what happened between 1947 and 1971. Why did we go there? See, for example, we did not have much representation in the armed forces. We did not have any meaningful representation of the civil services, and there was economic exploitation economic exploitation exercised by West Pakistan and East Pakistan. These details are so when people study history seriously as a subject, all these details should be given. So that and of course the important personalities should be.
Well, Syed Badrul Hasan, we have to take a break. When we come back, we'll pick up the same thread. Thank you. For those of you who just started watching, we are talking about the importance of the month of February in the history of Bangladesh. Okay, see you soon after this short break.